Hi, it's James Taylor here from Gigs Academy. And in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the 6 stages of artist development. These are the 6 stages that I see artists go through in the course of their career. Because every day I'm contacted by musicians from around the world, and many of them just feel really overwhelmed by all the things they're told they should and shouldn't be doing to take their career to the next level. And I think a lot of the uncertainty stems from the fact they're being told you need to be doing all these things. And frankly, as you progress in your career as a musician, you'll find that at certain points, as you go through each of these stages, you're going to need to do different things. So that's the first thing I see. I see a lot of overwhelm in the calls and emails I get from artists. The second thing I find is that a lot of artists are just trying to do too much, and they need to think about this called 80-20 rule, the Pareto Principle, where 20% of the things that you do are going to deliver 80% of the results. So I see a lot of artists, because they have no strategy really for their career and building their career, and they're told that they should be doing all these things because they read blog posts and articles. They just try and do too much stuff, and as a result, they don't do any of them very well. So these 6 stages are really kind of classic stages, and I've worked with artists at all stages of this. I've worked with the artist that's just getting started in their career, to the artists that they're getting their first albums out, their first traction in their career, to artists that are having hits, to artists who are really reinvigorating their career because they maybe hit a plateau in their musical career and in their playing. So let's get started. And the first stage that any artist really starts on is what I call the stage of exploring. Now, the explore stage is that classic stage where, if you're a band, you're going to be forming the band, you're going to be getting together, you're going to be doing those initial rehearsals, writing those first couple of tunes. Or if you're an artist, you've got an idea the kind of sound that you want, but you're really exploring your capacities as a musician, and exploring and starting to build your craft as a musician or as a band. So at this point, your objectives should really be to try new things, to discover new sounds that you want to discover, or to write in different types of ways, and to try out new material. So don't feel that you suddenly have to start getting out there and marketing in a big way and setting up websites and contacting promoters and doing all the the big heavy kind of duty stuff. At this point, you just want to be exploring your creativity as a musician. And at this point, you're maybe going to be doing your first shows, and maybe recording some first kind of tracks to let people hear. Because at this point, the biggest thing you want is feedback. You want feedback from trusted advisors or friends and family. So you're not looking to go out in the world. You just want some kind of initial idea of is this working, and to be trying different things. So at this stage, just focus on getting feedback. That's your goal at this explore stage. Then, as you've kind of nailed that part, you start to move on to stage 2. And stage 2 is really all about validating. The idea of validation of what you're doing. And I'm not saying validation in a necessarily so much in a commercial sense. It doesn't always mean that. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get validation that there's interest in the music that you're creating. There's no point in really trying to push to some of these other stages until you have a sense that your music is connecting in some way with the audience, with your target audience. And so at this point, the obvious ways to see validation is there's 2 main types. The first is money. Because they're paying the tickets to go to your shows, or they're buying those kind of downloads. And the second one is attention. So you're getting a lot of likes on your Facebook page, and you're getting a lot of follows. You may be getting some initial coverage for you or your music. They're the 2 ways that you can track whether you're getting interest. And at this point in your career, you're probably starting to do more shows. So at this point, you were just doing these first shows and demos. Here, you're starting to take it up a stage. You're starting to put more shows in. At this point, you're probably also maybe doing your first EP, first kind of kind of commercial release, but you're not really looking for it to sell 1 million copies. You're looking to find out whether the music that you're putting out there is being validated in the market. People like what you're doing. And at this point, you're also looking to try and find out if it's connecting with your target audiences. There's no point in starting to ramp things up and move if what you're doing isn't connecting. If people aren't coming to you saying, feeling really strong about what you're doing, and you're getting some sense of validation. So that's stage 2. Once you progress onwards, you get onto stage 3, and stage 3 is all about refining. And now authors know this, that an author will write their first draft of a book or a novel. That's really just for them. That's really just more for them, just to kind of get some of their initial ideas out there. The second stage is they start doing an editing, their first editing. And that's really still kind of mostly internal, maybe showing a couple of people it as well. But this third stage is when they're really refining their product, really refining. In your case, you're going to want to refine your sound, refine your songs, refine your live shows. So you'll also find at the stage that this is the point maybe you get your first agent, or you start looking for your first agent. I do a whole course just about the process of how to find agents, how to get agents, how to build relationships, getting multiple agents. And you may also be getting a manager at this point as well. And I also do a whole module in one of my courses on the process of getting managers and the difference between agents and managers, and when you might want one over the other, when you kind of bring them both into the party. So at this point, you're now starting to do pretty much non-stop touring if you're an artist. So here, you may be holding down a 9-to-5 job or doing something else. Music isn't your full-time thing necessarily, because you want to know if it works, if it's being validated. At this point, it's been validated. Now it's like, okay, we now need to do this. So your sound is going to become a lot slicker. And at this point, you're really starting to work on your marketing. You're really starting to look at how to make your marketing as refined as your sound and as your live shows. The way you know that you're at the stage and you're kind of you're doing it well is because you start to see viral growth. You start to see a lot of word of mouth about you or your music or your albums or your live shows. That's one of the first indicators that we look for. And it's an indicator why you get agents as well, is because they start to see this growth happening in the market at the same time. It's also a good point when you start looking at new markets. So let's say if you're based in Germany, you start doing some touring in the UK, or if you're based on the East Coast of the US, you start doing some shows in Canada or in California. You start to open up new markets. Also at this point, this is normally when a band or an artist will do their first album. Often at this point, the first album can either be self-released, or it could be maybe on an independent label that's really strong in their style of music or in their niche. So you know that you're kind of getting this right if you've got a slick sound. Your marketing is much tighter. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's certainly much better than maybe any of these stages. You're really starting to focus on that a bit more, and you're touring in new markets. Music's full time for you at this point, and it kind of has to be to make it work. Now, once an artist goes through these 3 stages, I see a lot of artists that will get stuck either between the validation and the refine stage, or the refine stage and this next stage. So at the supercharge stage, this is really all about stepping on the gas. You've built up your audience at this point for what you're doing. You've got a solid foundation in terms of your music, your songs, your live show, your fans. And now it's a case of stepping on the gas, really applying yourself very intensively, working on your career as a musician. And this point is normally demonstrated because you start to see massive fan growth at this point. All those people, you've got your early adopters here. This is when you really start to see the mass adoption of people coming into and learning about your music, buying your albums, buying your tickets for your shows. It's also the time that you probably have your first hit album. Now, when I talk about hit albums, I'm always conscious here that for a lot of artists, they say when you say hit albums, they think that means 1 million copies. And depending on what style of music you're involved in, that isn't maybe not necessarily the case. I've seen artists have incredibly successful careers And a hit album in their market is 10,000 copies, throughout the course of their career, or even 5,000 copies, because they have other revenue streams that are coming in as well, or maybe they're releasing albums at once a year, at a much more rapid rate. So it really depends. And I've worked with artists in the classical world, in the jazz world, in the pop world, in the rock, even in dance music. So I've seen all these different stages, and I've seen it being applied to artists in different styles and genres. The other thing you're going to start noticing here is you're going to be getting your first sellout tours. So at the refined stage, you'll probably start having sellout shows. But here you're going to be seeing an entire tour sellout. That's when you know you're at this stage. That's when you know you're kind of getting mastery of this stage as well. Another byproduct of this is growth of your team. Here you may have an agent, manager as part of your team, maybe an attorney helping you with any kind of contracts you need to do. But here you're going to start having things like tour managers, guitar tech, drum tech. If it's a band, you're going to have maybe a merchandise person that's on the road with you as well. Now, I've seen artists who do really, really well at this stage because, as well as building their fan base, they're also able to build a really great team around them and their music that are with them for years and years after this, and can really make the process of life on the road much more enjoyable, because there's a kind of camaraderie with a team that you don't always get, and you're maybe not going to have at these stages where you're a lone wolf or you're just kind of going around on your own as a band, for example. So that's the supercharged stage. Now, most of the issues I see, the artists that contact me, they're either at this between trying to get from validation to refining, or from refining to supercharge. So I have entire courses, say on the live side, on how to take your live career from this stage to this stage, or this one to this one. So I'll tell you about that maybe in some future videos. But these are the stages you've kind of gone through. So you've started exploring. Initially, you've validated what you're doing, so people actually want it, and you're making a really strong connection with your fans. You're refining it, so you're getting much slicker, both in your marketing, your stage shows, your songs, and then you get your first hits, the supercharge. Now, at this point, I see a number of artists that end up just moving back to these stages because they're not prepared for it in some cases, and maybe they haven't done some of these other things that well, and they've got rocky foundations for what they're doing. So if you progress from this stage, you go to the fifth stage in the sequence, which is this idea of maximizing. And this is the typical difficult second album stage if you're a recording artist. But what you find here is this is really where, as an artist, you're looking to maximize the different revenues. So at this point, you're maybe starting to do sponsorship deals or endorsement deals, or you're adding new products outside of just your typical recordings or your live shows. Maybe you're having VIP levels that people can buy so they can meet you after the show, for example. All these different multiple revenue streams are starting to come into it. At this point, what you're doing is you're consolidating. The whole point of this stage here is to consolidate and to not end up moving back. It's like snakes and ladders. You want to continually either stay there or to be moving up to the next level. And at this point, artists are normally referred to in this stage as cash cows. And what you'll find is if a manager will often have 3 artists in their roster. Many of the good managers will have 3 artists in their roster. They'll have, at this stage, they'll have maybe an artist whose music's connecting and they're just starting to build their career, and they're really helping, as a manager, they're helping them refine their career. They'll have an artist who's maybe getting their first hit, and that's a really exciting time, especially if, as a first-time manager, have your first hit. It's a great buzz to have that and to see your artist becoming successful. And then they'll have what's called a cash cow, and this is an artist who's maybe been around for a little while, who can pull in good audiences, sell good shows. Every time they release an album, it's going to achieve a certain amount of sales. These are the cash cows, and many artists will stay at this stage, or they'll go back. I think it's often difficult to stay at this stage and keep your music the same, you really have to kind of go to the next stage, which is this sixth stage, which is all about renewing. It's about renewing your music, renewing your brand, renewing your live shows. It's about, you know, injecting a new life and new ideas into your music, because often, you know, I've worked with artists that have been here who they're stale. You know, their music can become stale, so they need to take a risk and they need to renew their music. And you know, the classic examples of this are people like David Bowie, Madonna, who every 10 years they'll give a new lease of life to what they're doing with new ideas. Maybe it's new collaborations or new inspiration from musically that they're doing. So that there's the 3 R's that relate to this idea of renewing. The first is they reinvent. They're reinventing themselves. They're masters of reinvention. The second point is that they're looking to, you know, reconnect maybe with the audiences that were here right at the very start. They've maybe lost some of that relationship with them, and they just want to, you know, reconnect with these audiences, and also, you know, reconnect with what they feel makes them them, makes their music. So maybe it's about, you know, reinventing their sound as well. And then they're rediscovering. They're rediscovering the love of music, because often at this point, I mean, I've seen artists that have just been on a bit of a treadmill of just, you know, touring, you know, non-stop, you know, the constant, you know, the releases, the press interviews, and they get burnt out. So they have to sometimes take a step back and rediscover and fall in love again with why they got into music, you know, why they write songs, what they love about playing live, what they love about being in the studio. So that's an incredibly important point. Also here is they're looking to build new audiences. So they have their initial audiences, and what you're always going to find is, as you work on your next album, your next project, next live show, you're going to see people leaving, you know, and that's fine. You know, that happens. They move on to new artists, or they maybe leave your music for a while and kind of rediscover it again. You know, I did this really successfully with an artist who had a lot of big hits in the 80s and 90s, and then it kind of gone away, and you know, they had some issues, and they really needed to just renew themselves as a band. And they did it incredibly well. And one of the ways that they did it was appealing to these new audiences. In this case, it was appealing to the children of their original fans, so that the parents and the kids would come along to their shows. And, you know, they were suddenly filling out arenas again. They were suddenly having hit albums again, top 10 albums, because they reconnected what fundamentally made them as a band and why they got involved in music in the first place. So I hope these 6 stages have been useful to you. They can provide you an overall framework in which to think about your career. So as you can see, and as you can recognize, that, you know, the kind of things that you're looking to achieve at the explore stage are very different from the supercharged stage. So don't ever be fooled in thinking that you need to be doing all these things that people are telling you to do right now. As you progress in your career, you're going to be wanting to do different things, and you're going to be wanting to put different emphasis on different parts of building your career. So at this point, you just want to be spending your time, you know, woodshedding. You want to be in there writing new tunes, you know, trying out new ideas, new concepts, experimenting as a musician. At this stage, you want to be kind of finding out if your music is connecting with people. Does it hit them? Does it make the impact that you want your music to make? Then at this point, you know, you're really refining what you're doing. You're polishing, you know, this music and the live shows that you've created, and then, you know, you're supercharging. You know, you're having great fun, just really knocking it out of the park, and then you're looking to maximize, you know, all this hard work that you've done in, and, you know, maximize for as long as possible and create new revenue streams, and finally you need to kind of reinvent yourself and renew yourself as an artist. So I hope this video has been useful to you. I'd love to hear your comments, answer your questions. Please, at the bottom of this video, you'll find a section where you can ask questions. I'm happy to answer those as well. And I look forward to catching up with you soon.